We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence. We are standing in His presence. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. Standing on the promises of Christ my King, through eternal ages let His praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises, standing on the promises, standing on the promises of God my Savior. Standing on the promises, standing on the promises. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of Christ the Lord, bound to Him eternally by love's strong cord, overcoming daily with the Spirit's sword. Standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises, standing on the promises, standing on the promises of God my Savior. Standing on the promises, standing on the promises. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises.
So, Revelation chapter 8. And as I was walking in, Greg asked what verse we're going to start with. And I think that last class, we basically got through the first 4 trumpets. So we got through Revelation 8, verse 12, if I remember right. Okay? So just quick recap, and then we'll pick up where we left off. So again, the church is being persecuted by pagan Rome, and God gives this vision to John to encourage the church, while John is himself exiled on the island of Patmos. And so, after giving both commendation and words even of chastisement to 7 churches in Asia, which represent the whole of the church, John is caught up to heaven, and he sees that God the Father is on His throne. Even though Domitian, who is the emperor of the Roman Empire, most powerful man in the world, even though he's persecuting the church, that's not taking place because God, has abdicated His throne. No, God is on His throne, and God knows what's going on, and God is going to do something about it. The church just has to be faithful. And so in God's hand, you remember, are the scroll, or is the scroll with the 7 seals. And these seals reveal God's judgment against pagan persecuting Rome. And as the 7th seal was opened, well, that introduced another series of 7 judgments, and this time it's 7 trumpets. So these 7 angels who are before the throne, and remember, you've got God on his throne. The Lamb shows up. You've got the 7 spirits. You've got the 4 living creatures. Beyond that, you have the 24 elders, and then you just have this innumerable company of angels. But of that innumerable company of angels, there are 7 special angels who have authority. And so these 7 trumpets are given to these 7 angels, right? And so just as the trumpet blasts back in Joshua's day brought God's judgment on that first Canaanite town for its sins and brought the walls of Jericho, tumbling down, these 7 trumpets are going to bring judgment on pagan persecuting Rome. So, remember we talked about the parallels between the seals and the trumpets in their organization. The first 4 are related to one another in both series, and then the next 2 are related, and then you've got an interlude, and finally the 7th will come. And so same pattern here with the trumpet. So these first 4 trumpets, as they are blown, they bring judgment on people indirectly. They directly bring judgment on the earth, and the earth through the heavens. But the judgment doesn't come directly on people through them. So you remember the first trumpet brought the hail with the fire mixed with blood, the lightning, and the vegetation on the earth was burned up. And then the second trumpet, verse 8, caused this flaming mountain to fall into the sea and caused the living creatures of the sea to be destroyed and the ships to be destroyed, probably a volcano. But again, that's not directly on people. And then the third angel sounds his trumpet, verse 10. And so this, maybe this meteor, this blazing torch, strikes all the rivers, all the fresh water, and, causes the water to turn bitter, and people die from the water, but, it's not directly on the people. And then the fourth trumpet sounds, verse 12, and a third of the sun and the moon and the stars are struck, and it brings darkness. But again, not directly on people. Well, that's about to change. With these next 2, it's going to be people who are afflicted. And so notice verse 13. So this is technically the start of the new material tonight. So look at Revelation 8:13. John says, "As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying mid-air call out in a loud voice, 'Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the trumpet blast about to sound by the other 3 angels.'" Now this eagle that's flying midair may not be an eagle. It could be a vulture. The Greek term could be translated either way. For instance, this is the same word that we find back in the Olivet Discourse. So in other words, Matthew chapter 24 and Mark chapter 13, where Jesus says, "Wherever the carcass is, there will the blank be gathered." Well, the vultures. It's where the vultures will be gathered. So this could be a reference to a vulture, or it could be a reference to an eagle. In fact, a little bit earlier in the book, you remember chapter 4, and let's see, at verse 7, as the living creatures are described, the first living creature is like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature had the face of a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. Well, there's our word. Well, that's probably not a vulture. I don't think there are vultures in heaven. An eagle's a little bit more appropriate. So it could be either one. But But at any rate, this eagle makes this announcement. And it's not an announcement that the world, wants to hear. It's not good for the world. It announces these three woes that are coming. And these woes are not woes that are going to affect the planet primarily. These are woes that are going to affect the people. Now, the previous, as we said, to beat a dead horse, the previous four trumpets, they've affected material creation, not people directly. But the next three trumpets are going to affect people directly. And so, we're going to find the first of these woes carried out in chapter 9, verses 1 through 12. Look at chapter 9, verse 12. The first woe is past, two other woes are yet to come. So we find the second woe then, chapter 9, verse 13, through the end of the chapter. And then notice the statement that's made in 11, verse 14. The second woe has passed, the third woe is coming soon, and the third woe will be in chapter 11, verse 15. All right? So let's get into these woes. And notice the judgment on the inhabitants of the earth. And I guess I need to make a comment about that phrase, the inhabitants of the earth. That's a phrase that we found earlier, isn't it? Do you remember chapter, let's see if I can find it. Okay, yeah, chapter 3, verse 10. Chapter 3. Sadly, I didn't. With everything that happened today, I hadn't had a chance to look at Revelation today, so I'm going off what I studied yesterday. So hopefully my memory doesn't fail me. So look at chapter 3, verse 10. To the church in Philadelphia, since you've kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. So notice, God's people are distinguished from the inhabitants of the earth. Now, obviously, Christians are inhabitants of the earth, right? But in this text, they're distinguished from the inhabitants of the earth. So the inhabitants of the earth are those who are living in rebellion to God. They're those who are persecuting Christians. Or look at chapter 6 and verse 10. So, the fifth seal, the martyrs, cry out and they ask, how long until God, notice verse 10, how long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? Now, again, they're not asking God to bring judgment on faithful Christians who are still alive. So they're distinguishing Christians from the inhabitants of the earth. The inhabitants of the earth is a term for those who are living in rebellion against God, those who are persecuting the church. So these woes, it's the rebellious that these woes come upon. They are the ones who are the inhabitants of the earth. So again, when I was a kid, and my mom was taught Revelation through these correspondence courses by Pat Robertson, the 700 Club. She learned Revelation as something that was scary for Christians, something that Christians dread. But when you understand Revelation rightly, it's not telling us stuff that should scare Christians. It's telling us stuff that should encourage Christians. Remember, chapter 1 and verse 3 pronounces a blessing upon Christians who read and understand the book of Revelation. Because we're not the inhabitants of the earth. Christians have never been the inhabitants of the earth that will be judged. We've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. All right, so let's read this first woe then in chapter 9, verses 1 through 12, and then we'll back up and make some comments on it. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like smoke from a gigantic furnace, and the sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads, they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and in their tails they had power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon. And then the NIV adds this statement. I mean, it doesn't correspond to words in the Greek, but it just explains what we just read. That is destroyer. The first woe is past. 2 other woes are yet to come. Now, I mentioned the perspective that I interpret and teach Revelation from. I'm technically speaking, a partial preterist. Technical term. All that means is I think that Revelation in the main is in the past. Not all of it's in the past. The judgment's yet to come. New heavens, new earth are yet to come. So that's why I'm not a full preterist. I'm a partial preterist, but preterist just means it's in the past. But, for those who interpret it from the premillennial standpoint, and especially not just the historic premillennial standpoint, but the dispensational premillennial standpoint, they think it's all future, still future in our day. And so whenever you hear them teach through chapter 9, they think that these locusts that come down but don't attack, vegetation, they attack, people who don't have the seal of God on their foreheads, they think that these actually are fulfilled in the Apache attack helicopters. So I mean, that's the perspective that some people have, So anyway, all right. Well, let's back up and notice these verses. So fifth angel sounds his trumpet, and when he blows his trumpet, this star falls. And, we've seen stars, falling up to this point in time. But this is an interesting star, because this star that falls from the heaven to the earth, I mean, it's not just a normal star, is it? Because this star that falls, from the sky to the earth is given a key. Now, you don't give a burning gaseous body a key, right? So this star is not a literal star. This star represents something, doesn't it? And the star is interpreted, when you get down to verse 11, as an angel. Verse 11, they had a king over them, the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek it's Apollyon. So, a little bit later, we read about stars falling. And these stars are angels. These stars, have reference to angels who fall with Satan. Look at chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 3. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. Now, a little bit later, notice what we read. Verse 7. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels, all of a sudden he has angels, fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Now, it doesn't explicitly say that the third of the angels that the dragon sweeps out of heaven with his tail are angels, but that seems to make sense. That's kind of the common interpretation. So, a lot of people read Revelation 9, verse 1, and they understand this star that falls from the sky to the earth that's given, the key, to the shaft of the abyss, who is described as this kingly angel of the abyss, whose name is Abaddon and Apollyon, whose name is Destroyer. They understand this to be some sort of evil angel. Perhaps it's a reference to Satan himself. And that may be it. But others interpret this not to be an evil angel, not perhaps a reference to Satan, but they understand this to be another angel. One of God's angels who's just endued with authority to exercise judgment on, pagan persecuting Rome. And they would point to a passage like Revelation 20. Look at chapter 20. Look at verse 1. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss. So notice this angel has the key to the abyss, and presumably that's the same abyss that we read about in chapter 9. And so this angel who has the key to the abyss was also holding in his hand a great chain, and he seized the dragon. That is, he seized Satan, the ancient serpent, who's the devil or Satan, and bound him with that chain for 1,000 years and threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him, with the key that he has. So that's a good angel. So some people suggest, well, this isn't an evil angel, this is a good angel. And I'm not sure. I think you can give good arguments either way. I do have to say the language that, chapter 9, verse 1, that this angel is a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. That idea of fallen, he doesn't come down, in terms of descending, but he's fallen. That might lend a little bit more weight toward the idea that this is an evil angel, or maybe the devil. But that's about all we can say. And isn't that the way it is with Revelation? You can look at some of these verses and the overall picture, what's going on overall. The overall picture is clear, but when you get into the details, that's where things get a little bit fuzzier, right? All right, so back to chapter 9. So, and I'll save my comments on let me say this. Let me say this about the abyss before we go on. We read about the abyss other places in the Bible. Look, for instance, in Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. And I was teaching Revelation. It really is an exercise in self-control, because there's just so much to look at, so many passages to turn to that do help help us in getting some clues for interpretation, but you can only say so much, or the study of Revelation will last for years. So we just have to be careful. But you remember here in Luke chapter 8, you've got this man who's demonized, and there's not just one demon in him. There's a legion of demons in him. Now, a legion, is a Roman military term. It's a division in the Roman military. When it had its full complement of soldiers, a legion had 6,000 soldiers. Now, you think about it. Jesus cast 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene. So isn't that an interesting thought? Spirits aren't limited by space in the same way that physical bodies are. So in Mary's body, indwelt by her spirit, there were also 7 demons in there. And this demonized man in Luke 8 has a legion of demons. Now, we don't know if that means 6,000 or if that means just a whole bunch. But, it seems like there's a whole bunch, because this legion of demons is going to cause a herd of 2,000 pigs to rush down a steep embankment and drown in the Sea of Galilee. So, it seems like the legion may be, really 6,000. So anyway, notice verse 30 of Luke chapter 8. Jesus asked them, "What's your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. Verse 31, they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. There's our word, the abyss. Well, that's the same word that we find back over here in Revelation 9. This angel is given the key to the shaft of the abyss. And so the abyss is a place that demons are confined. That's where Satan, Revelation 20, is going to be confined. So bad things are in the abyss. All right, Revelation 9, verse 2. So when this star that had fallen to the earth, this kingly angel, Abaddon and Apollyon, when he had opened the abyss, notice, smoke rose from it like smoke from a gigantic furnace. So this is a place of fire. This is a place of punishment and just bad things. And so, you can see the picture, can't you? We've all overcooked something in the oven, haven't we? And you open the oven door, and the smoke just billows out, and the smoke detector starts going off, and you're opening up doors and windows, and carrying out whatever's burning. Well, here, smoke is just billowing from the pit of the abyss, like from a gigantic furnace. And notice what this smoke does. The smoke causes the sun and sky to be darkened. Right? So darkness, that's been one of the judgments. The fourth trumpet, you remember, caused, a third of the sun and the moon and the stars to be darkened. Well, here they're darkened again, and this smoke from the abyss is the cause. Verse 3, whenever the smoke starts to clear, something even more terrifying than the smoke, and let me say this about the smoke before we go on. I grew up in Missouri, and I think it was in the fall. It's been hard to believe that I've been gone from there for 30 years, however long it's been. But, it's farming country. And, they burn the fields at a certain point. And when they start burning the fields, man, the smoke, it just covers everything. And that's what I picture this scene. to be. It's smoke that just covers uh, you know this area where the pagans live. But there's something more horrifying than the smoke. Look at verse 3. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth, and they were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. I remember one time I was preaching in Georgia, and I was staying with one of the deacons at that church, and we were in his kitchen talking, and I was barefoot, and I was backing up, and he said, "Stop, stop." And I stopped and turned around, and I mean, there was a scorpion just right at my feet. I was about to step on that scorpion. Scorpions are bad news. But you don't ever think of grasshoppers being like scorpions, do you? But here these locusts, they're given power like that of scorpions. And scorpions are associated with the devil, aren't they, in Scripture? Look at Luke chapter 10 for just a minute. Luke chapter 10. Jesus sent out the 12 on the limited commission, and then later he sent out the 72 on a similar limited commission. Don't you wish we had a list of the names of the 72? But we don't. I mean, there's just so much, about Jesus and about other biblical events that we sure would like to know more about, but we just don't. But when the 72 come back from their limited commission, verse 17 of Luke 10 says, the 72 returned with joy and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." Verse 18, Jesus replied, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Now, this is interpreted various ways. Some people think that this refers to the original fall of Satan. So Jesus, is showing his divinity and putting himself back in the beginning whenever it was that Satan, committed his sin of pride, and God cast him down from his position, of authority as a good angel. Other people interpret Jesus to be, if you will, describing what happened through the ministry of the 72. So in other words, as the 72 were out preaching and casting out demons, that in essence amounted to Satan falling. Because, these parts of Satan's kingdom fell through their work. And so Jesus is just saying, listen, get the significance of what happened. It's not just that demons submitted to you in Jesus' name, but you defeated Satan's kingdom. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. And then verse 19 says, I've given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. So here, obviously the snakes and the scorpions symbolize Satan's power. And so again, we go back to Revelation 9, and maybe that does, again, support this idea that this star that falls from heaven is the devil or one of his evil angels. All right, Revelation 9, verse 4. So these locusts with power like scorpions. Right now, the distinction between locusts and scorpions. Locusts hurt people indirectly. Locusts eat all the vegetation. They eat all the crops. I mean, locust plagues brought famine. They were horrible, absolutely horrible. Still are horrible, in Africa and other parts of the East. But locusts, they attack vegetation. Scorpions attack people. And so these locusts, they have authority like scorpions. They hurt people. Verse 4. These locusts are told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Now this connects the trumpets back with the seals. Now you remember, the seventh seal, amounted to the seven trumpets being given, right? So there's a connection between the seals and the trumpets. But this connects back to the seals as well, because you remember in that interlude between the sixth seal and the seventh seal, we had these two scenes in chapter 7. Remember that? And that first scene in chapter 7, verses 1 through 8, is that these angels that are holding the four winds back, they're told not to allow the winds to blow. And so these would be winds of God's judgment. Don't allow the winds to blow on the earth until a seal was put on the foreheads of God's people. And God's people are the 144,000. 12,000 taken from these 12 tribes of Israel. And as we saw Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, that's not a reference merely to fleshly DNA descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it's a reference to God's people who have faith in Jesus, whether they be physical DNA descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Gentiles. So those who are sealed are God's people, right? So here, again, the emphasis is the inhabitants of the earth are the ones being afflicted, and God's people are not counted among the inhabitants of the earth. God's people are those who have the seal on their forehead, so they won't be hurt as God pours out his judgment. They're going to be like, whenever God rained down fire and brimstone on Sodom, what happened with Lot? Or whenever God brought the judgment of the flood on the world of the wicked, he told Noah to build an ark. And so, God's people are protected. All right, verse 5. So these locusts are not allowed to kill people, but they're only allowed to torture them for 5 months. Now, interestingly enough, the lifespan of locusts is 5 months, from May till September. And so that's where the 5 months come from. And anyway, as these locusts, torture people, the torture, the agony, the verse goes on to say that people suffer is like the agony from the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. Because scorpions don't typically kill people when they strike them. It's just agonizing. Verse 9, or hold on, 6. During those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. There's some things worse than death, aren't there? Dying is a fear that we have. Was it Bildad in Job 18 who calls death the king of terrors? There is a fear of death that people have, but what people fear more than death is suffering. That's why Saul, whenever he was wounded in battle and he saw the Philistines closing in, that's why Saul begged his armor bearer to kill him, so that the Philistines wouldn't take him and torture him. Or you think about Job. As Job is afflicted, losing everything and then being diseased from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet. he begged God, please take my life. Why have you spared me? Just end this agony. I cry rather than eat. I don't get any relief at any time. Whenever I fall asleep, my nightmares wake me up. I just have no relief at any time. Please, God, just kill me. Some things are worse than death. And so God punishes, these unbelievers who are persecuting Christians by causing them to suffer conscious torment, pain in this life. They want to die, but death eludes them. Verse 7. We have a description of these locusts, and they're not like any locusts you've ever seen. The locusts look like horses prepared for battle. And, you can go, for instance, to the book of Job. We don't have time now, but you can go to Job 38 and, read a description, or not 38, I think it's Job 39, and read a description of a war horse back in that day. So these locusts look like horses prepared for battle. On their heads, they wore, something like crowns of gold, because wherever they go, they're victorious. Nothing can stop them, right? So they wear these crowns of gold. And their faces resembled human faces. Well, remember back in chapter 4, the living creatures, one of the living creatures, had the face of a human being. So what this symbolizes the fact that there's intelligence. As they strategize in attacking people, there's intelligence that's guiding them. So they have these human faces. Verse 8. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. Now, I don't know what to say about their hair being like women's hair. Is it, since they're like horses going to battle, is it like a mane? Is that the idea of hair being like women's hair? I don't know. I just don't know. But I will say this. Isn't that interesting? Their hair is like women's hair. Their hair is like women's hair. So in other words, there's hair that's characteristic of women that's not characteristic of men. And you think about a passage like 1 Corinthians 11, verses 14 and 15, does not even nature itself teach you that, about a man having long hair and a woman having long hair. For a man to have long hair, it's a shame. For a woman to have long hair, it's her glory and beauty. Just an interesting point. I'm not making any laws concerning hair length. My brother-in-law has long hair. He's my age, and he has long hair. I have to say, though, I am jealous because my hair is getting thinner and thinner. Every time Charity cuts it, I see more and more scalp back here, and my brother-in-law, it just seems like his hair is getting thicker and thicker the older he gets. I think my hair is growing other places. So, anyway, let's get off that. But isn't it funny how the older you get, it's like your hair goes from here out your nose? Because I know I never had to trim nose hair this much when I was 18. So anyway. All right, we're over, and we've lost the point. So we'll pick up here next time. Let me look again here. We'll pick up at 9. Yeah.
As I travel through life with its trouble and strife, I've a glorious hope to give cheer on the way. Soon my toil will be o'er, and I'll rest on that shore where the night has been turned into day. Up in the beautiful Paradise Valley, by the side of the river of life. Up in the
There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of the evergreen tree. How I long for the paradise valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see. As I roam the hillside, or I list to the tide, as I pluck the sweet flowers that grow in the dale, a faint picture is there of a land bright and fair, where perennial flowers ne'er fail. Up in the beautiful paradise valley, by the side of the river of life. Up in the valley, the wonderful valley, will be free from all pain and all strife. There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of the evergreen tree. How I long for the paradise valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see. Though your garden is rare, it is not to compare with the flowers that bloom in the garden above. In the midst of it grows Sharon's perfect sweet rose, 'tis the wonderful flower we love. Up in the beautiful valley, by the side of the river of life. Up in the valley, the wonderful valley, will be free from all pain and all strife. There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of the evergreen tree. How I long for the paradise valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see.